back here at Stoplogic Motorsports, and today I'm given the opportunity to ride White Hollywood's GPX FSE 250E air-cooled 4-stroke from GPX Moto. We'll be mixing in a bit of review and some live impression clips in this video and get some general ideas of what to expect with this bike. In the meantime, hope you enjoy the Cosmo. So like the RX B250 and 250L from Orion, the GPX FSE has a 250cc air-cooled single overhead cam engine, a 6-speed manual transmission with counterbalancer, a seat height of around 36 inches. Their site states that their weight is 246 pounds, which I'm not entirely sure if that's the case. The suspension is suspended by SCZ shocks and forks, which I touch on a little bit of background on those later on in the video. A 28mm carb without really any name on it, a slightly smaller tank at 2.5 gallons, 21 and 18-inch wheels. Then again, we're also with the magic button with the start. And the stated horsepower is around 20 horsepower. Like most of the bikes in this category, everything about is billet. Hubs, triple clamps, anything that you can billet. One thing that the Chinese manufacturers do better is better quality components for a lot of the ancillary items of the bike.
Yeah, that shifter's a little bit. Oh, dude, this suspension, oh my god. So much feeling in the front brake, suspension's nice.
So the first real standout item about this bike that I encounter is how amazing the suspension is compared to my WR250R, which has been slightly worked on, and the Orion RXB. This bike is actually a cut above just about anything else I've ridden, especially from a Chinese offering, including the AJP series with sag suspension.
Okay, so the power delivery of this bike is super linear. Full disclosure, this has the Joe Henner 4-degree timing mod on it. So it revs out a bit harder. So I'm curious if he has to ride at this bit.
The bike is suspended by SCZ suspension, which is kind of like a clone of earlier open cartridge design KTM suspension. So who is this bike for, you ask? I would say this is a slightly higher end offering as far as the Chinese motorcycle market goes. I believe only one Chinese manufacturer has a larger footprint in the market, and that's SSR. This is a bike that would be well suited as a second bike for somebody with a primary, relatively expensive bike like a KTM, or for somebody who's relatively new to the sport like a C-Class, Enduro racer, or amateur racer, and TCCRA would be my point of reference. The bike appears to be well put together and have quality components. The only concern that I've heard from a few of the owners is the people who own older models are having trouble getting parts sourced for their older models. So that's kind of a thing that seems to be a reoccurring thing with most Chinese bikes.
Now I can see where this is a bit more refined. I could see the extra 1,500. I will say the Orion is a little more nimble, and I like the fact this bike has like a more forward stance that I'm kind of used to. I wonder what's up with the carb though. I see where he says this feels like the carb's always just a little bit out.
One of the struggles of this bike in particular has been trying to dial in the carburetor on it. White Hollywood's done an extensive work to the original carb and then bought a Nibby Performance carb, 28mm if memory serves me right. So it seems like it might not be an across the board problem, but the bike is a bit hard to dial in carburetor wise.
So if I had to describe the feel, this is like the middle ground in wheelbase and turn between my WR and the Orion. This definitely has a sharper, faster handling than the WR. Not as fast as the Orion. The suspension just slays my WR. I mean, I'd say this is dialed in nice. And I'm a bigger guy. I'm probably got about 100 pounds on poor White Hollywood. This bike's probably complaining about buckling under my generous performance. About this bike is the steering. It's a little heavy, not bad heavy, like I don't want to put a what's that, steering stabilizer on it. It feels like it's got a lot of heft to the triple clamps, and not in like a bad way, like in a stable way. You can tell there is a good bit of polish on this bike. After this, I would seriously consider the TSE. If the ergos are the same as this bike on the TSE, I would love it.
One thing I absolutely loved about the bike, unlike my WR250R, is I'm pushing about 260, 270 pounds, and I can freely jump this bike with no issues. It really encourages you to ride it aggressively.
Above its suspension on the WR. Fuel delivery on the WR is a bit better. The nimbleness of the Orion is its best trait. Once more into the brake.
So the third and last issue I really experienced with this bike is the rear brake had actually bled off some of the fluid. It looked like there was a bit of seepage from the rear banjo bolt, but it also doesn't have a traditional reservoir on it with a rubber cap or anything. It's a one-piece reservoir like the RXB where you take off a steel cap. I'm going to do a bit of work on this bike with Mr. White Hollywood about getting the brakes bled and fluid changed out and see if we can address this potential issue.
I'm feeling kind of bad for sticking White Hollywood on the WR list.
So what are my final thoughts about this bike? Well, for what it is, it's actually quite amazing. Though the price point of about $5,000 after shipping does make it a bit more of a harder, I guess, purchase. I guess comparative bikes in that price range would be the KLX 300R, the KLX 300 Dual Sport, the CRF 300L, and I guess a bevy of used Yamahas and some older used KTMs like 2003, 2004 era. So comparatively speaking to those bikes, for the Japanese Dual Sports, this is definitely a step above, needing much less out of the box to be a comprehensive product. You're not going to be plunking down $2,000 right off the bat on suspension to make the, well, honestly, for lack of a better term, god-awful suspension of the Japanese Dual Sports any bit better. Though the aftermarket support on the GPX series is not as strong as a lot of the Japanese Dual Sports. I think that if you're getting a bit serious about racing, then this would be a good bike to kind of ease into that, since if you destroy a $5,000 bike, you know, that's not going to be as big of a loss. Plus, the engines, as I said in the RXB video, are readily available and replaceable. And if you've seen White Hollywood's content, which you should like and subscribe to, he's put this bike through hell and back. I mean, he uses it for pretty, I guess, extreme enduro, rock gardens, all sorts of stuff. And this bike definitely does show the results of being well loved, let's say. It has withstood an incredible amount of abuse, which is impressive to me. Having ridden the AJP bike of the similar engine, the RXB, a whole bevy of Apollos, Brazos, Hawks, I'm not a Chinese anti-bike person by any means. I'm willing to try anything, and if it's enjoyable, it's enjoyable, and this bike is actually enjoyable. I would like to see some of their higher end offerings. I would compare it against a SSR, however I didn't try a like for like model, so I would need to try like the FSE250E to kind of get a gauge about the quality versus. But the suspension is the standout item of this bike by far and above. This suspension on these bikes is on par with bikes easily $7,000 to $8,000. I'm about to plunk down $1,300 on my WR just to get it possibly 3/4 as good as this bike. The other side of the coin, though, is you know, I'm still a bit leery myself of purchasing one because I don't want to have a FSE250 and then they discontinue it and I'm now looking for parts or having to get stuff custom fabbed. Being that my channel was originally based on restoring 1990s dirt bikes, and with COVID, taking 6 weeks to get an axle was starting to put me off a bit. I would give this bike a wholehearted endorsement though, if you are finding yourself not in possession of $10,000 to $14,000 for a brand new top-of-the-line bike. This bike for $5,000 after shipping, or even some of the ones that are close to $6,500 mark, will net you just about as good of a product, assuming that you're good at wrenching your own stuff. So, I would say if you have $5,000 to $7,000, I would pull the trigger on one of these before plunking down 10 or 11k on something like a CRF 450L. Well, in the meantime, hopefully you found this elucidating, and if you like the content, like and subscribe. If you don't, feel free to criticize me harshly in the comment section. In the meantime, have a good day.